First one was somebody did request us to do a webinar on the extruder assemblies for the Pro 2s, kind of getting into the internal of all of those. I don't have enough to go over it right now, so we'll most likely be doing that later. But if you did want to kind of get into that process now, our tech team does have a guide available for that. So if you make a ticket, ask for it, we can send it out. If you really need to do a disassembly in a rush, otherwise we will be doing a webinar stream on a rebuild of the extruders later on. I, of course, do have to be a little bit biased here and promote the Raise 3D branded ASA. And then most likely in regards to the Pro 2s and other machines as well. I do like our ASA, just running it on my other machines at home. So that one does do very well. And then just, of course, on Pro 2 machines, we do have the templates for already, so it'll be easiest to get going. If you are looking for any kind of material recommendations or anything else that's third-party for brands beyond ASA, on our main website, under resources, we have the Open Fulfillment Program. So I just like to kind of push this whenever I can, but this is a full list of our third-party manufacturers. I do recommend all these brands, but particularly Atomic Materials. If you are looking into like carbon fiber nylons or nylon materials, Clarion's very, very good. And then the Tallman materials for some of the pure nylons as well. I like the 910, 645 is really good. Tallman 910 is actually what I ended up using for a lot of the corner block chunks that went into the testing rig frame. If you guys saw that video, a lot of that was Tallman 910. The big thing with speeds on both these machines, the E2 and the Pro, is that the upper limit for what the machine can run at is higher than what would be best for the optimal print. If you continue pushing speeds, you're eventually going to hit a point where the flow or the temperature of it isn't enough to keep up with how fast you need to push material through it. EV3D, I believe it's them, has a different nozzle type for completely different hot ends. This is completely unrelated to the Pros, but just as an example. They have what they call the volcano hot end, and that hot end is a couple inches long. It's a very long section of material that the filament sits in, and that gets heated and melts that entire section. So you have a lot more being heated as it goes through. Those are specifically designed in order to push print speeds and increase the material flow. So for these machines, I typically don't recommend going over the 80 millimeters a second for printing speeds. Pushing it further just continues to degrade the parts. But the motors themselves will kind of max out at 150 millimeters per second for movement in the X and Y. So you can kind of push them at that limit. 150 millimeters a second is the upper limit of the motors. I think 80 is probably around the limit for the material. So for the E series, that one is automatically bed leveled. So if you run the probing test on it, it gives you that little preview in the window. If you're going to go without a raft, the lower the flatness, the better you would go for, the better it's going to be for actually getting those to stay down. So I can probably do a tutorial later in actually how you would make that adjustment on the E series. Because it can be done. We would recommend going in and releveling the flatness. But just kind of as a general topic right now, if you are going to adjust the bed level on the E series, you just remove the plate, and then there are magnets in each of the, there are screws in each of the magnets on the bed. You don't want to adjust those. Those are just to hold the magnets in. There is another hex screw that's going to be in each of the four corners, and then one in the center typically. So you would be adjusting that one. Tightening and loosening that one will adjust the bed position. There are springs underneath that. And then on the Pros, you typically don't need to do any kind of leveling adjustment on these machines. They are machine level from the factory. If the bed level ever does come into question, it is best to make a support ticket with us. We can send out a file to test that, actually verify it, and then we can help guide through the adjustments if needed. But typically it's not a bed level adjustment. You would just need to lower the Z offset with the pin assembly. If you bring it a little bit closer to the platform, then that typically is enough to help it stick down. If I am also going without a raft, I will typically also use glue, just PVA glue stick on the bed, just to make sure that they really stay down. I have done Magic Glue also, putting that down on the bed typically for nylon prints, and polypropylene. The Magic Glue PA or Magic Glue PP is good for the polypropylene material. So if you're really getting trying to go for a really flat surface on that, using those adhesives, smoothing them out beforehand, I'll actually use another tool over it. That can help get a good surface for polypropylene. Those are really, really particular. And then adjusting the Z offset to make sure that you're pressing it down a little bit more than you can typically go without a raft. It's going to be the same process. If you think that there is anything with that particular bed, open a support ticket with us, because we do want to get a bit more involved in that machine. We'll send the buildable G code. We can help re-verify if it is high or if it does show consistency in those areas with the test print. Then we can go on move steps from there. We might need to do a couple other things, do more adjustments on the actual section of the platform down here. But we do really want to be kind of part of the process, because it is much, much easier to throw the pros out of level if you just start kind of adjusting the screws at the bottom. It's much easier to bring it out of level than it is to bring it back into level. So it's just going to be a lot smoother of a process if we're there from the start. That is correct. The texture tool does only work for the side surfaces of a part. It does not put them on top. If you did kind of want to have a textured effect on the upper layer, then that would most likely need to be bottled into the part itself, at which point then you're getting beyond what the texture tool is able to do through Idea Maker. I'll bring in my housing again. I'm gonna go ahead and cut off the top so we can actually get a view inside of this. There we go. And I'm working with this whole unit. I'll go ahead and run auto repair on it. And then should be good. So running a texture inside of here. I'm doing a custom texture. We'll bring this back in and then pull in our logo again. All right. So I've got the texture. It is being put all over this. Inside the main template, there are settings in here under the texture. And then this gives us one option to enable texturing the outside only. So with that enabled, that should only texture the outer portions of this part. If it doesn't, there is another way that I can force it to not put textures in those areas. Let me see, I think I had some other settings in here from running it before, so I'll go ahead and restore defaults. So I'm working with just the part on the raft and its textures, and then back to the standard material. The actual preview for this, I'm just going to make sure that we only have textures on the outside. If it does put textures inside this portion, so it did still want to put textures when it starts to curve back in, it starts to bend in those walls, so it's not seeing them just as the kind of cylindrical flats. The way that that setting sees it in the template is it's basically just checking for the inside or outside of a ring. So it's not putting texture inside the ring that I made here, but it is putting texture when the geometry starts to change inward. So if I did want to specifically set that up, then I can bring in another modifier. If we bring in another like this, then I just need to position it relative to the rest of this model, and then get it scaled up so it overlaps with the regions that I do not want to texture. Go to the modifier, and then since in this drop-down menu you have the options to kind of specify exactly what you want the modifier to do, by default it changes the settings of whatever it's overlapping with, but I can set it to block texture within that modifier. It's kind of possible, Astro, to put it in certain areas. I'll talk to that in a second. But yeah, so I just have my slice here, and then it's actually following exactly where that cylinder is cutting through, removing textures in all those areas. So it would be possible to bring in another STL that's specifically matched to the faces that I don't want textures on, then line them up and then assign it as a modifier. It just needs to overlap a little bit with that outer wall, and then it will remove the textures. The one for trying to put the texture in a certain area can kind of be done if you are running it as a not a repeating. So if I go ahead and clamp it to an edge, it's a little bit trickier to work with, but it does kind of try to bound it in certain positions. Or clamp to border. Yeah, so now that I have it just on these specific borders, it's only texturing that small section. I can go back and do a lot of other things with the way that the texture is being brought in. If I specifically build the PNG to have logos and whatever in specific areas, then when I apply it over a part, it'll put textures just in those regions, but then I'm specifically making the texture for this particular model. I do have a poly box here. I know it's not a print dry, but I'm just using it because just using it for a placeholder for the time being. What you'd want to do is have this positioned next to the machine in the side door where you would load in the filament spools. There are gaskets down here that are specifically designed to feed from the outside. So all you would need to do is just run the filament that's going to be in the box through these feed tubes into the machine, and then if we wanted to, we could either continue to run the tubing up and have it follow the rest of the filament. So we'll just run it up into the rest of it like that, or just connect it directly in here and then run it to the top. But it is done through the gaskets in the side door. And I think that is going to do it for our stream today. So thank you very, very much to everyone who tuned in. Keep an eye out on our socials for the next couple streams, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again. Have a good one, and I'll see you later.